In a quiet suburb of Boston, lined with red brick homes and peaceful gardens, Margaret Wilson gazed out the window of her study, watching dusk settle gently over the neighborhood. She worked as an editor at a local publishing house, known for its sharp literary taste and meticulous standards. "Mom, dinner's ready." The voice of her 14-year-old daughter, Emily, called her back from her thoughts. "Thanks, I'll be right there," she replied, closing her laptop softly. Before leaving the room, her hand brushed unconsciously over her wedding ring. She and Richard had been married for 15 years. Her husband, an investment banker, had given her and Emily a stable, comfortable life. But recently, he had been coming home later, and his business trips were becoming more frequent. When Margaret entered the dining room, Emily had already finished setting the table. "Where's Dad?" she asked. Emily shrugged. "He's not back yet. I called him, but he said his meeting's running late." Margaret nodded calmly. Lately, Richard had been around less. Were his meetings and client dinners truly what he said they were? The doubt flickered, but she quickly pushed it away. Richard had always been a good husband, reliable, devoted. There was no real reason to question him. "Mom, what do you want for your birthday? It's the day after tomorrow," Emily asked during dinner. "Oh, I haven't really thought about it. Just having you is enough. But we should still do something special," Emily insisted sweetly. Margaret smiled. A flicker of warmth returned to her eyes. "I wonder if Dad got you anything," Emily continued. "Well, he's been so busy lately. I'm not even sure he remembers," Margaret said quietly. Just then, the front door opened. "I'm home," came Richard's voice. Emily jumped up to greet him. Margaret stayed seated, watching from the table as he walked in, still in his suit, tired but smiling as he embraced their daughter. "Sorry I'm late. The client wouldn't stop talking," he said, kissing Margaret on the cheek. "It's fine. Let's eat while it's still warm," she replied. During dinner, Richard said little about work. Instead, he listened to Emily's school stories with genuine interest. Margaret sat in silence, letting their voices fill the space, while a quiet unrest stirred beneath the surface of her thoughts. Sometimes the ones we love most seem distant, not out of malice, but because life stretches them too thin. If you've ever felt that invisible drift, you're not alone. "By the way, Maggie," Richard said, using the nickname he had for her, "about your birthday. Something came up. I have to fly to Chicago unexpectedly. I won't be back that day." Margaret couldn't hide the disappointment on her face. "I see. Work comes first. But I promise we'll celebrate properly when I return," he said seriously. Margaret nodded faintly. That night, as she lay alone in bed, Margaret picked up her phone and dialed her friend Linda. "Richard's leaving on a business trip on my birthday," she said. "I'm thinking of hosting a small dinner, just something quiet. Can you come?" "Of course," Linda's cheerful voice came through the line. "Why don't you invite Eleanor Lanner too?" Eleanor, her neighbor, was like a mother to Margaret, and an incredible cook. "Yes, I'll ask her tomorrow." Even in solitude, connection can bloom from unexpected places. If you've ever felt the ache of planning something alone, remember, just one kind gesture can shift your entire day. As the evening plans began to take shape, Margaret's mood lifted slightly. Even without Richard, perhaps her birthday could still be a good one. But the day before her birthday, Richard acted strangely. He kept checking his phone, pocketing it quickly. When Margaret tried talking to him, his answers were distracted. He seemed off. "What time are you leaving tomorrow?" she asked. Richard looked mildly startled. "Oh, early. I'll be gone before you wake up." Margaret said nothing more. The next morning, Richard was already gone. A short, handwritten note sat beside her pillow. "We'll celebrate properly when I get back. I love you." Feeling slightly hollow, Margaret went about her usual morning routine. Emily had made her a special breakfast and handed her a handmade card. "Linda and Eleanor are coming over tonight. We're doing a little party," Margaret told her. "That sounds kind of boring," Emily said. "Dad's not even here for your birthday." "There's nothing we can do. Dad's busy," Margaret answered, trying to sound braver than she felt. Truthfully, she had thought the same thing. Later that day, as she arrived home from work, she saw a message from Linda. Something came up. "I'll be a bit late." Then another. "I'll be there with Eleanor by 7. Be ready." At 7, the doorbell rang. Margaret opened the door to find Linda and Eleanor standing outside. "Happy birthday," they said in unison. Come on, where are we going?" Margaret asked, laughing nervously. "No time to explain." Linda grinned. "Just grab your coat and come with us." Half laughed, half pushed into the car, Margaret had no idea what was coming. The car drove into the city and stopped in front of a high-end restaurant called Lucata. "What are we doing here?" Margaret began, but her voice caught when she saw what stood ahead. Richard, dressed in a suit, was waiting at the entrance. "Surprise," he said, smiling brightly. The trip to Chicago had been a lie. "I planned a special evening for you." Margaret was stunned. "But why?" "Come on," he said, taking her hand. "Everyone's waiting." Sometimes, when we least expect it, life hands us a moment we thought we had lost. And in those moments, something in us begins to believe again. Inside a private dining room, familiar faces turned toward her. Her colleague, Jessica, college friends Sarah and David, and Emily, beaming with excitement. "Surprise!" they all shouted. Margaret felt tears rise in her eyes. Richard had planned all this, just for her. Her worries evaporated in an instant. "So that's why you've been acting strange lately?" Margaret whispered in Richard's ear as they stepped into the room. "I'm sorry I lied," he murmured, voice low with guilt. "But I wanted to see your face." Dinner was lavish. The candlelight danced on polished glasses and laughter warmed the space like a fire. For the first time in a long while, Margaret felt truly at ease. She let herself sink into the moment, into the joy around her. After dessert, Richard stood and lifted his glass. A hush settled. "Tonight, we're here to celebrate the birthday of my beloved wife, a wonderful mother, and an extraordinary editor," he began. "It's been 17 years since I met her, 15 years of marriage, and through it all, she's remained the light in my life." Margaret's heart swelled. She hadn't realized just how much she needed to hear those words. For a moment, she felt guilty for the silent doubts that had haunted her recently. "And tonight," Richard said, "I have a special gift." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, a striking wristwatch rested inside, elegant and timeless, with a deep navy face and a slender silver band that caught the light like moonlight on water. Margaret's breath caught. "Do you like it?" he asked. "It was made just for you. Look at the back." He gently turned the watch over. Etched on the case were the words, "Forever Love." "It's too beautiful," she whispered, voice trembling. "Thank you." Richard fastened the watch onto her wrist with deliberate care. "It fits perfectly." He kissed her hand. Their friends burst into soft applause. Eleanor wiped a tear from her cheek. "What a wonderful gift," she whispered. "There's a magic in feeling seen, in receiving something made just for you. If you've ever longed to feel that again, Perhaps it's closer than you think." Later, Linda leaned over with a playful smile. "That's a stunning watch. Looks expensive." "Yes," Margaret replied proudly. "Richard said he had it custom made. That's why he's been acting so strangely." "I'm sorry," Linda chuckled. "I doubted him too." Margaret gave a shy, forgiving smile. "And I'm sorry, I doubted my husband." On the drive home, Emily fell asleep in the back seat. Margaret sat in quiet gratitude, fingers gently brushing the cool metal on her wrist. "Thank you," she said, squeezing Richard's hand. "This was the best birthday. I wanted to celebrate properly with you." He didn't take his eyes off her. "That watch is special." Over the next few days, Margaret wore it every morning without fail. Her colleagues complimented it, remarking on its elegance. She loved it not just for its beauty, but because it had been given with love. At least, so she believed. But after a week, a faint rash appeared on her wrist, subtle at first, barely worth noting. "It's probably nothing," she told herself. "I've never had allergies to metal." Richard had assured her the materials were high-end. Still, the redness worsened. "Why don't you see a doctor?" Linda asked, frowning. "Just to be safe, especially with custom stuff." Margaret hesitated. The idea that something might be wrong with such a meaningful gift felt almost like a betrayal. "I'm sure it'll clear up soon," she said, brushing it off. We all want to believe that love is simple, that beautiful things can't possibly hurt us, but sometimes the signs our body whispers are the ones we're most afraid to hear. But the rash didn't fade, it deepened. Margaret began waking up with headaches. Her energy dropped. She found herself unusually tired, dragging through her days with a weight she couldn't explain. Still, she couldn't bring herself to take the watch off. One night, Richard noticed her wrist. "What's that?" he asked. "Just a small rash," she said. "It's nothing." He examined it carefully. It could be the watch. Maybe take it off for a while. "But it's from you," Margaret said, voice quiet. "Your health matters more," he said gently. "Just take it off. Let's see if it improves." It gave her pause. She had clung to the watch as a symbol of reassurance. But perhaps he was right. A few days later at breakfast, Richard frowned. "Maggie, you don't look well." "I'm just tired," she replied with a smile. But even she no longer believed it. At Emily's gentle insistence, Margaret scheduled a visit to see their family doctor, Dr. Johnson. She explained her symptoms, the rash, the exhaustion, and, almost reluctantly, the watch. "It could be a metal allergy," the doctor said, "but it seems unusually persistent. Let's run some full tests." Blood, urine, skin samples, everything came back normal. "There's no clear cause," the doctor said. "It could just be stress." Margaret nodded, but something inside her remained unsettled. When every answer sounds vague, when your intuition whispers that something is wrong, it may be time to listen, because sometimes protecting your peace means asking the hard questions. One afternoon, as she walked home, she paused in front of a tiny old pawn shop called Golden Pawn. She wasn't sure why, but something in her urged her to step inside. The place smelled faintly of time. Old clocks ticked softly on the walls. In glass cases, vintage jewelry glimmered in quiet repose. Behind the counter sat an elderly man with silver hair, inspecting a stone through a loupe. She stepped forward. "Welcome," he said kindly. "Looking for something?" "Actually," she hesitated, then slid the watch from her wrist. I'd like you to take a look at this, if you don't mind. He took it carefully in his hands. Albert Finch, he introduced himself. Owner of the shop. This is beautiful. Is it new? My husband gave it to me for my birthday last month. She rolled up her sleeve to reveal the rash. But when I wear it, this happens, and I've been feeling unwell. The doctors couldn't explain why. Albert's expression tightened. He reached under the counter for a small toolkit. Mind if I open it? Margaret nodded. With quiet expertise, Albert unscrewed the back of the watch. His face stiffened. His voice dropped. Where did you get this? I told you, it was a gift from my husband. Albert went pale. He closed the watch and reached beneath the counter again, this time retrieving a folded newspaper clipping. Where did your husband say he got the watch? He said it was custom-made, Margaret answered, her voice small. Is there something wrong? Albert laid the article before her. The headline read, Gift of Love Becomes Weapon of Death. It was a case from 5 years ago. A man had tried to poison his wife, using a custom-made wristwatch crafted from a rare toxic alloy. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. What if the object you trust most is quietly destroying you? What if love, too, can become a mask for something darker? Albert's voice was grave. This watch, it looks luxurious, yes, but it's made from a special alloy that slowly releases toxic compounds through skin contact. That man tried to kill his wife with this same design. In Margaret's mind, pieces began to slide into place with terrifying clarity. Richard's distracted behavior, the unusual gift, the surprise party, the strange illness, it all aligned now, horribly, unmistakably. No, she whispered, her voice shaking. That can't be. My husband would never. Albert met her eyes with quiet intensity. You need to go to the police, right now. In a fog of fear and disbelief, Margaret stepped out of the shop with the watch clutched in her hand. Her heart pounded, her mind swirled, but one thing was clear, she had to find out the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. At the police station, she tried to explain, but her words stumbled over themselves. The watch, my husband, poison. Please, slow down, the woman at the desk said gently. Her badge read, Detective Jennifer Davis. She looked to be in her mid-40s, composed but kind. She led Margaret into a private room. There, Margaret recounted everything. The gift, the rash, the fatigue, the pawn shop, Albert's warning. Jennifer listened silently, then carefully placed the watch in an evidence bag. We'll have it tested, she said, but I'd also like you to undergo additional medical testing. If this watch is releasing toxins, we'll find evidence in your system. Margaret nodded slowly. Please, don't tell Richard. If he finds out what I know. Jennifer placed a steady hand on hers. You're safe now. That's what matters. Let us handle the rest. Sometimes, strength is simply the act of speaking out. And when fear whispers, stay silent. Courage answers, not this time. That night, Margaret went to the hospital. Blood tests, skin samples, a full toxicology screening. She lay awake long after, her body exhausted, her mind racing. The results, she was told, would take a few days. On her way home, the world around her felt unreal. Had the man she loved truly tried to hurt her, to kill her? When she returned, Richard wasn't home. Emily mentioned he'd gone to visit a friend. Alone in the kitchen, Margaret began preparing dinner automatically, her hands moving while her mind drifted. I'm home, came Richard's voice as the front door clicked shut. Margaret inhaled deeply and turned. "Welcome back. How was your day?" He kissed her on the cheek. "The usual. And you?" His eyes flicked subtly toward her wrist. "Where's your watch?" She kept her voice calm. "It wasn't working right. I took it to the jeweler. They said it needs some adjustment. I'll pick it up later this week." For just a moment, a shadow passed over Richard's face. "That's a shame. I liked seeing you wear it." What if love was watching, waiting, measuring your every move? Would you recognize the performance or keep playing your part? During dinner, Margaret pushed herself to be present. She spoke of school, of work, of nothing in particular. Richard acted normal too, but from time to time, he glanced at her in a way that made her skin crawl. Later, while Richard was in the shower, Margaret's phone vibrated silently. It was a message from Jennifer. "Preliminary lab results confirm the presence of toxic substances in the watch. Same compounds found in your blood. We'll talk tomorrow. Be careful tonight. Contact me if anything changes." Margaret read it with trembling fingers, then immediately deleted the message. The next morning, she left early. "I've got an early meeting at the publishing house," she said to Richard, who was sipping coffee. In truth, she headed straight to the police station. Detective Jennifer was waiting. "The full lab results are in," she said, her tone clipped. "There's no doubt the watch was engineered to release toxins slowly, reacting with your skin and body heat over time." Margaret felt her knees weaken. Why? Why would my husband do this?" "We've summoned Richard Wilson for questioning," Jennifer said. "Based on the evidence, we want to hear what he has to say." Just then, another officer entered. "Mr. Wilson has arrived." Jennifer looked at Margaret with measured calm. "Please wait in the observation room. We'll keep you safe. You deserve to hear the truth." Sometimes, the hardest part isn't facing the villain. It's realizing the villain once held your hand. From behind a two-way mirror, Margaret watched Richard enter the interrogation room. He looked agitated, but composed. "Why did you call me here?" he asked. "Your wife is safe," Jennifer replied. "Mr. Wilson, we'd like to ask you about a certain watch, the one you gave her." A flicker of tension crossed his face. "What about it? Where did you get it?" "I had it custom-made at a luxury watch store in Boston. It's called Elegant Time. I have the receipt." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a folded slip. Jennifer studied it, then looked up. "That's interesting. The address listed on this receipt doesn't exist. And the store, there's no record of it. This receipt is a forgery." Richard's face turned pale. "There must be some mistake. When a lie collapses, it does so with silence. And in that silence, the truth shouts." Back at home, Linda sat beside Margaret. "I never trusted him. I didn't say anything, but when your health started declining, I had this awful feeling." Emily had overheard just enough to sense the fear. "Did Dad try to hurt you?" she asked, her voice cracking. Margaret pulled her daughter into her arms. "Your dad made terrible choices, but you're my brave girl, and I'm here. I promise." 3 months later, the trial reached its conclusion. The jury's decision was unanimous. Richard Wilson was guilty. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in prison for attempted murder and insurance fraud. On the day of the verdict, Margaret stood in the courtroom, her voice steady but aching with emotion. "For 15 years I loved you, trusted you. You were my husband, the father of our daughter, and you betrayed everything we built." She paused, eyes fixed on the man she once believed she'd grow old with. "Why? Why did you try to kill me?" For the first time, Richard responded, not with remorse, but resignation. "There was a time I loved you," he said, "but people change. After I met Vanessa, I wanted something new. Divorce would have taken too long, and I needed the money." Silence fell like a stone across the room. Finally, the judge spoke. "Your actions are among the most despicable this court has seen. To harm the very people you are meant to protect, that is the greatest betrayal." Though her heart bore deep scars, Margaret felt a quiet sense of justice. The truth had been uncovered. Her life had been saved by a chance meeting, a stranger's wisdom, and a choice to listen to her instinct. After the sentencing, she visited Albert at Golden Pawn. "You saved my life," she said simply, holding his hand. Albert's expression softened. "I recognized the watch immediately. The man from the article 5 years ago, he was the son of a close friend. Since then, I've studied every detail of those custom watches. When I saw yours, I just knew." "Thank you," Margaret whispered. "I don't know how to live day by day now." Albert's eyes were kind. "You've been given a second life. Don't waste it. Sometimes the people who save us are strangers at first glance, but over time, they become part of our story, our anchor, our family." 6 months later, the sun filtered into Margaret's new apartment. She stood in the kitchen making coffee, her body lighter, her posture straighter. She still bore traces of the past, but she was healing. "Did you have another bad dream?" Emily asked over breakfast. "A little," Margaret replied, smiling gently. "But they're getting better." "Is therapy helping?" "It is. The nightmares come less often now." With the support of counseling and true friends, Margaret was slowly reclaiming her peace. The toxins were long gone from her body. Her health was improving. But healing from betrayal took more than medicine. It took presence, patience, time. Every Saturday, she and Emily visited Albert. His stories about antique watches and rare gems had become their weekly ritual. He was more than a shopkeeper now. He was family. "One of a kind," he said once, showing Margaret a silver ring. 1920s, Art Deco, very rare design. "It's beautiful. I'm truly grateful for everything you've taught me," she told him. Albert smiled modestly. "I just did what I could." Margaret had also grown close to Detective Jennifer Davis. On her advice, she joined a support group for survivors of abuse. There she met others whose stories carried the same invisible bruises. In their shared experiences, she found healing and strength. A year after the trial, Margaret began taking writing classes at the local college. At first, it was therapy. Then it became purpose. She started writing her story. Meanwhile, Richard's world behind bars grew darker. Vanessa left him. Her family cut all ties. His appeals were denied. He would serve every day of his sentence, alone. 5 years later, Margaret's book, Silent Poison, My Husband's Watch, became a national bestseller. Its pages echoed the pain of so many whose suffering had remained hidden. Women from all walks of life wrote to her. "Your story saved me," some said. "I thought I was the only one," said others. "Because of you, I found the courage to leave. And perhaps most beautifully, you helped me find myself again." If this story has touched something deep inside you, if you've ever questioned what's real or what's safe, know this: you're not alone. And healing, like hope, often begins in silence, then blooms. On the final day of her book tour, Margaret stood on stage, facing a room full of readers. Her voice was calm, steady, whole. "What is a real family?" she asked. "For so long, we've defined it by blood, by marriage, but maybe that's not the whole truth. Maybe a real family is made of those who see you, protect you, and want nothing more than your happiness. In the front row sat Albert and Jennifer, two people who had no obligation to her, yet had done more for her than anyone ever had. To everyone listening today, she said, don't ignore the warning signs. Don't be afraid to speak. There are people right now who care deeply about you, people who want you safe. They are your family, even if you haven't met them yet. And if you too have felt trapped inside your own body, if the mirror no longer reflects the person you used to be, there is something you need to know. Recently, a fascinating natural discovery has started to change lives. A mysterious purple peel studied for its ability to help the body burn fat quietly, even while you sleep. Without extreme diets, without punishing routines. If that awakening calls to you, if your body is asking for change, for freedom, for renewal, you'll find more in the description of this video. Margaret's life had begun with love and nearly ended in betrayal. But through that fire, she found something she hadn't expected, a deeper sense of self and the strength to help others do the same. Her wounds might never fully vanish, but they had become the soil in which something stronger could grow. In the months that followed her book's success, Margaret continued to speak, to write, to listen. She didn't consider herself a hero, just someone who had lived to tell the truth. Each Saturday, she and Emily still visited Golden Pawn. The scent of thyme, the quiet ticking, Albert's gentle voice, it had all become part of their healing. This one, Albert said one morning, holding up a delicate brooch, belonged to a nurse during the Second World War. She kept it hidden in the lining of her coat. Margaret smiled. You carry so many stories. And so do you, Albert replied with a knowing look. She also kept in touch with Jennifer Davis, now retired from the force. They met for coffee, talked about the past, the present, and how many lives had been touched by one act of courage. With Jennifer's encouragement, Margaret began volunteering in support groups. She met other women, some whose stories echoed hers in painful detail, some who hadn't spoken their truth until now. Together, they found space to breathe. There is power in storytelling, not just in the telling, but in the listening, in being heard and in hearing yourself say, I lived, I survived, and I'm still here. A little over a year after the book's release, Margaret stood outside a classroom at the college, watching her students file in. It was a new course she was teaching, on writing from lived experience, healing through narrative. She had come full circle, not as a victim, but as a voice. As the students opened their notebooks and the chatter settled into silence, Margaret looked out at them and took a deep breath. Stories, she began, aren't just words on a page. They are lifelines, and sometimes they are warnings, but always, always, they are bridges. And on that morning, in a simple classroom filled with light, her story became someone else's first step toward healing. If something in this story resonated with you, if it awakened a spark, a memory, or a longing for change, don't ignore it. Because change doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it begins with a whisper from your own body, or a quiet discovery waiting just outside your comfort zone. You'll find more in the description of this video. Margaret and Emily walked home later that day beneath a sky brushed with pale gold. Emily laughed at something Albert had said earlier. Margaret looked over at her daughter, alive and happy, and felt the fragile peace of a life rebuilt. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew who she was, and she knew she was not alone.